For 85 years, Lee Radziwill lived in the shadow of Jackie Kennedy. She fought over millions, competed for the same men, and stole boyfriends. People believed they understood her tale until she passed away in 2019. However, after 6 years, Tina, her daughter, finally spoke up. Everyone was astonished by what she disclosed regarding Lee's familial secrets, emotional coldness, and partiality. Even Jackie was unaware of the aspect of the well-known socialite that the confession revealed. While people are still alive, certain realities are too difficult to share. On March 3, 1933, Lee Radziwill was born in Manhattan at Doctors Hospital. She was Caroline Lee Bouvier in full. Although he was known as Black Jack, her father, John Vernu Bouvier III, was a stockbroker. Janet Norton Lee, a stunning socialite, was her mother. Jackie, Lee's sister, was born in Southampton on July 28, 1929, barely 4 years after Lee. However, the world in which they were born was collapsing. The nation had been devastated by the Great Depression. Lee was born in 1933, the year that unemployment reached 25%. Millions of lives had been lost in the 1929 stock market crash, and the Bouvier family was not exempt. Black Jack's brokerage was struggling to stay afloat. He rapidly lost customers, forcing the family to vacate their opulent residences. In America, over 15,000 banks had failed by that year. Lee later said that she was afraid of becoming bankrupt because of her father's reckless choices at the time. She grew up yearning for stability, which she believed was absent from her early years. The Bouvier clung to an image of ancient money in order to make things appear better than they actually were. Black Jack even claimed to be descended from French aristocrats. However, genealogists revealed it all to be false by the 1970s. Their actual ancestry dated back to a 19th century cabinet craftsman. As a result, Lee was born into a world that was already disintegrating and acting fake, and she would struggle to change that story for the rest of her life. Lee divided her time between a penthouse on Park Avenue and a stately home in East Hampton starting when she was 3 years old in 1936. However, beneath the glamour, chaos reigned. Her dad was a heavy drinker. He was consuming bottles of whiskey every day by the late 1930s. It was whispered in society circles that he had affairs and violent outbursts. He was sued in 1935 for embezzling $100,000 from family trusts. They were almost decimated by that. He lost his job on Wall Street in 1938, and rumors circulated that he had engaged in insider trading. Everything fell apart in 1940 when Lee's parents got divorced. She was only 7 years old. Black Jack was accused of mistreatment by her mother. The courts granted her full custody and ordered Black Jack to pay $1,000 in alimony each month despite his $200,000 debt. Lee never forgot the scandal that was reported in the newspapers. All of a sudden, Lee and Jackie were living in different houses, surrounded with stress. Janet remarried in 1942. Hugh D. Auchincloss, a rich oil heir with almost $50 million, was the victim this time. Additional children were brought into the scene by the second marriage, including half-siblings Jamie in 1947 and Janet in 1945, as well as Russia in 1927. In this new world, Lee felt as though she didn't belong. At the age of 10, she began to argue with her new stepsisters and brothers over who would eventually get what. She once claimed that those years had taught her to be wary of people. She claimed that after her father passed out during a family gathering in 1942 due to intoxication, humiliating her in front of everyone, she vowed never to be weak again. Lee used to spend his summers at a 7-acre mansion in East Hampton known as La Sada, that her grandfather paid $50,000 for in 1925. It included views of the seaside and 8 bedrooms. There, the family hosted well-known people. Lee began to meet the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers by 1937. Although everything appeared magical from the outside, tension was present within. The star was Jackie, who was 4 years older. Jackie won a competition to ride a pony in 1940. When she lost, 7-year-old Lee sobbed. The family had to sell La Soda in 1950 when their grandfather, Major Bouvier, passed away in 1948 with $1 million in debt. Lee subsequently stated that a place's beauty did not equate to its tranquility. There was an intoxicated altercation at Lesotho one evening in 1939. She discovered that night that beneath its refined exterior, elite society could be brutal. Jackie was already clothed in similar costumes for pictures by the time she was 5 years old in 1938. Their mother had an obsession with appearances. Janet spent $500 a year on their clothing, even during the Great Depression. She enrolled both girls in $200 per session ballet classes following the divorce in 1941. It was always said that Jackie was more attractive. Lee was extremely upset by that. At the age of 17, she had a nose job done in 1950 to alter her appearance. She had learned to imitate the fashions that would ultimately make her famous by the time she enrolled in Miss Porter's school in 1947. It was a mask, though. Her mother kept her in a closet for hours in 1939 when she tore a frock. From that point on, Lee started to conceal her suffering beneath flawless attire and flawless smiles. She attended the Potomac School in Washington after beginning her education at Chapin in Manhattan. She enrolled at Miss Porter's in Connecticut in 1947, where annual tuition was $1,500. Today, that would be almost $20,000. She was talented in acting and drawing. She received praise for her inventiveness in her 1950 yearbook, although she failed history and math. Conversely, Jackie received perfect A's. In 1951, she even took first place in a Vogue writing contest. Lee was described by teachers as intelligent yet crazy. In 1949, she avoided schoolwork, sought excitement, and was sent in detention twice a week. She began searching for her own escape because she detested being compared to Jackie. In 1948, at the age of 15, Lee began to rebel. One semester, she missed 12 classes. She received a 2-week suspension after being spotted smoking Marlboros behind the dorms on October 15, 1948. People were taken aback. She was regarded as the good daughter. Even worse, there were allegations that she was seeing a man named Peter who was 20 years old. On November 5, 1948, her mother pulled her out of school for a serious conversation. It was unsuccessful. She hitched a ride 10 miles to a party in February 1949 after climbing out a window. At daybreak, she returned, sloppy and grinning. Despite spending $500 that year cleaning up her mess, her father still referred to Jackie as the favorite. She missed 18 days, falsified notes, and almost lost her allowance of $50 per month in 1950. Lee started to distance himself from the ideal Bouvier persona that year. People started to take notice. Her stepfather's family had owned Hammersmith Farm, a 28-room home in Newport, since 1887, and she spent her summers there. They spent $100,000 on it. She began learning to ride horses in 1941. She had won a ribbon with a pony named Dancer by 1946. She never felt at home and had to learn French language and mannerisms from governesses. Over $10 million was her stepfather's net worth. Jamie and Janet, her half-siblings, were born in 1947 and 1945, respectively. On August 15, 1948, she felt invisible and stayed upstairs during a large celebration. She stopped assisting with household tasks in 1950. She sneaked out to sea on July 3, 1951, and spent hours stranded by herself. Her stepfather caught her smuggling alcohol on June 28, 1949. A family quarrel ensued. Notwithstanding the abundance of yachts and picnics, Lee felt confined by a life that was not her own. Being someone's sister was never something Lee Radziwill enjoyed. While she was still mostly seen in the shadow of Jackie Kennedy in the early 1960s, she began working covertly with Giorgio Armani. At first, it wasn't official. She would go around Milan wearing his handmade designs, showcasing a velvet skirt and a black and white striped top that attracted attention at an event in 1982. She formally declared it by 1980, becoming the director of Armani's special events. By 1985, she was making $50,000 a year at her first professional job. It may not seem like much now, but for someone who was raised in elite society at the time, it was shocking. She introduced Armani to Richard Gere at a party in 1980 and used her connections and charm to get him into Hollywood. By 1984, Armani's U.S. sales had skyrocketed from $10 million to $135 million. Despite Jackie's alleged displeasure as she favored American designers, she assisted him in dressing Oscar winners. However, Lee saw this as her opportunity to finally make an impression. She made yet another significant move in 1966 when she collaborated with Truman Capote on a ladies' home journal fashion series. Readers were immediately taken aback by the articles. When money was limited in 1961, Lee acknowledged that he had secretly borrowed Jackie's Givenchy outfits and even smuggled them into the White House against JFK wishes. In order to maintain appearances, she occasionally pawned her valuables for as much as $5,000, and she disclosed that her annual clothes budget was only $20,000. Capote assisted in writing on her 1962 visit to India. Includes the dress she wore, which was a 1/200 Howie Talon design from Yves Saint Laurent. When Lee revealed that she always felt uneasy around Jackie, whose outfit budget was 5 times larger at $100,000 annually, things became tense. The piece was published in July 1966 and had 2 million readers. She became more well-known as a result of the partnership, but she also became more exposed. Rumor had it that Capote loved her more than she knew, and their friendship was permanently ruined when he revealed personal details in a 1975 magazine article. She received a lot of attention in February 1962 when Rolling Stone magazine dubbed her the chic Radziwill. She was photographed wearing a $3,500 Mondrian dress by Yves Saint Laurent in one of the 15 images on the 10-page spread. She lived the high life, donning $2,000 dresses and $800 turbines. One anecdote described how she lost a $500 shoe during a camel ride in Pakistan in 1961. She stood out thanks to that story, which also increased ISIL sales in the U.S. by 40%. However, it also caused her to get into a fight with Jackie, who smacked her a month later. Jackie subtly expressed her disdain by attending a White House luncheon that year wearing a dress that was comparable to the ISIL dress. The sisters even started fighting over fashion. Lee started her own fashion label in 1967. In an attempt to sell 1,000 things per month, she invested $80,000 and sold $150 turbines and $200 scarves at Bloomingdale's. However, everything went wrong. She lost $100,000 by December when a dye problem destroyed 500 pieces in July. The line was criticized for being pricey, and just 300 items were sold. Shipments were delayed by Italian factories, and the surrendered stock cost her an additional $20,000. Despite earning $50,000 from her Bloomingdale's contract, the company didn't succeed. After this, she moved to interior design because her acting career had already failed. She participated in a number of bold picture assignments for photographer Cecil Beaton between 1959 and 1970. She was seen in $1,200 men's suits for Vogue in 1966. With certain images raising questions about her sexual orientation. Only a few months after JFK passing, she was photographed wearing makeup smeared with tears in 1964. Beaton claimed that she was far more attractive than Jackie. However, the suspicions reached a pinnacle in 1970 when Andy Warhol made remarks suggesting she might be bisexual. These images, which were featured in 15 magazines, contributed to her reputation as stylish and edgy. Following her divorce in 1974, they ceased working together. Truman Capote betrayed her in the same year. He published a chapter in Esquire titled La Cote Basque, 1965, in November 1975. It used fictitious identities but clear information to tell anecdotes about his buddies in high society, including Lee. He shared intimate details she had shared with him during their 2 decades of acquaintance. Lee was heartbroken. She considered filing a lawsuit, but the writing was too neatly concealed. She joined Slim Keith and others in cutting off Capote, who had once written a play specifically for her. He passed away by himself in 1984, marking the end of an era. She gave writing a go in 1974 as well. She wrote a book on their 1951 trip to Europe called One Special Summer with Jackie's Assistants. Two publishers rejected the first chapters because they included too many details about their background, including references to romantic liaisons. After they softened it, Delacorte Press eventually released it. Despite selling 10,000 copies, critics criticized it for being too light. Nevertheless, it gave Lee a new mission. She went on to write other books, such as Lee in 2015 and Happy Times in 2000. Even so, she consistently acknowledged that the early drafts were much more juicy. Lee founded an interior design company in 1974 following his divorce from Prince Stanislaw Radziwill. She achieved success very rapidly. For more than $500,000, or almost $3 million in today's currency, she renovated Baron Guy de Rothschild's Paris apartment in 1974. The French aristocracy was astounded by her silks with Indian influences. She was making $2 million a year by the late 1970s. Collaborating with customers such as Stavros Niarchos. With a $10 million portfolio and 15 significant projects annually, her business moved to New York in 1980. Nevertheless, rumors circulated that she ignored the new wealthy and only worked with those who had titles. She refurbished the opulent suites at the Pierre Hotel in New York in 1975. A $27 million gem theft had recently occurred there. Lee installed concealed safes in furniture, such as a bed frame worth $50,000 that had hidden drawers. One suite even had a $200,000 price tag and a panic room that resembled a closet with bulletproof glass. While some admired the combination of security and beauty, others felt it was excessive. She created 10 other hotels in the same way after earning $1. $5 million from the Pierre alone by 1978. She began writing her book Happy Times in the early 1980s, and it was eventually published in 2003. The first versions were explosive. She wrote of a 1962 dispute with Jackie over a $10,000 loan and Jackie's refusal to assist her in 1982. In 1983, the Kennedy family brought in attorneys and threatened to fine her $500,000 for publishing. She made changes to the drafts, but in 1984, some sections that revealed tales of conflict and jealousy, including Jackie's ire over Lee's 1959 marriage to a prince, leaked. She made $1 million when the book eventually came out, selling 50,000 copies in a single month. She went back to fashion in 1980, working as a public relations executive for Armani, where she made $200,000 annually. It was $500,000 by 1985. By outfitting Richard Gere for American Gigolo, which brought around $52 million in 1988, she helped Armani get into Hollywood. For $300,000, she signed with Marc Jacobs. However, when Jacobs published an advertisement featuring Lee in a provocative stance in 1985, a scandal sprang out. Following criticism, it was removed, costing $1 million in missed advertising. She allegedly used the Kennedy name to gain attention, according to some. Despite being blacklisted by conservative organizations in 1986, Jacobs' fashion career persisted. She also participated in 20 campaigns by 1989. She taught more than 30 young designers between 1975 and 1985. However, in 1987, she acknowledged in interviews that she had turned down 15 applications in 1984 because they lacked the proper breeding. According to her, composure was more important than skill. In 1988, the American Society of Interior Designers wrote 200 irate letters and expressed disapproval of this. Her firm's application rate fell by 20%. After being fired for not fitting in, a former mentee sued her for $100,000 in 1990. Nevertheless, she started a few prosperous careers, such as one designer who went on to work for the Rothschilds. However, the incident cost her 3 significant clients by 1989. After 2 years apart, Lee and Prince Radzio officially divorced on July 23, 1974. When he passed away in 1976, he had $30 million in debt and had been having affairs with younger women. In order to survive after losing her princess title, Lee had to sell family heirlooms at auction in 1975. Along with other items valued at $50,000, she sold a Polish saber from the 19th century for $8,000. In order to make ends meet, she took on extra interior design gigs and began dating attorney Peter Tufo. Jackie provided for her children, Tina and Anthony, because their father's fortune was worthless. Her marriage was failing when she had an affair with Aristotle Onassis in 1963. She spent time on his boat, the Christina, and he gifted her a bracelet made of 10,000 diamonds. By October, however, Jackie had taken charge. Jackie allegedly smacked Lee during a furious argument about Onassis that same year while they were staying at the Clare Edges Hotel in London. In 1968, he wed Jackie, although Lee subsequently claimed she had no intention of marrying him. The feud was confirmed by letters from 1964. A July 1963 New York Post piece that alluded to the drama made the affair public. On September 23, 1988, Lee remarried to Herbert Ross, the director of the movie Footloose. He was 61 and she was 55, but by 1995 he had taken over. In addition to telling her what to wear, he prohibited her from seeing acquaintances like Truman Capote. Lee said in court documents from 2001 that he kept an eye on her calls and prevented her from leaving the house, which caused her to become depressed in 1999. October 15, 2001 was the date of their divorce. Shortly later, Ross passed away from heart failure at the age of 74. Although Lee lost their $12 million Hamptons house, they did earn $5 million the settlement. Her life spiraled out of control due to narcotics in the late 1970s. In 1977, she began using cocaine at parties hosted by Studio 54. In biographies published in 1980, she acknowledged doing it nearly every night. She was observed passing out on the dance floor in July 1978 after combining cocaine and Valium. Her identity was discovered in documents linked to $800 worth of cocaine during a club raid in 1979. In 1975, she had to have her stomach pumped at Lenox Hill Hospital after taking too many Quaaludes. After having a public breakdown in Southampton in 1981, she joined Alcoholics Anonymous. At 5'6", she had dropped to just 95 pounds. Truman Capote's own drug use only made things worse. She began her recovery in 1982, but her bond with Jackie grew strained. In 1970, she borrowed $100,000 from Jackie to buy a London apartment and promised to repay it in a year. But by 1975, it was still unpaid. Jackie grew frustrated, especially after Lee defaulted on a $20,000 rental. Interest raised the debt to $150,000 by 1980. In 1985, Jackie leaked the story to Vanity Fair, calling her sister a moocher. When Jackie died in 1994, she left nothing to Lee in her will. She wrote that Lee had already received support, but when Lee died in 2019, her own estate was worth $50 million. She left nothing to the Kennedy family. One of the worst fights happened in 1973 when Lee secretly sold gifted jewelry for $15,000. Jackie found out and filed a court affidavit. Their relationship never fully recovered. Lee Radziwill spent her whole life competing with her older sister Jackie Kennedy. It started when they were young and never really ended. In 1951, when Lee was just 18, she took Jackie's boyfriend, Michael Canfield. Jackie had been serious about him. Their mother was so upset she had to sit Lee down and talk to her about loyalty. But Lee didn't stop there. She married Canfield in 1953. That marriage didn't last. It ended in 1958 after rumors came out that Lee had been unfaithful. Then, in 1962, Lee started seeing Aristotle Onassis, but 6 years later, in 1968, Jackie married him instead. Lee claimed she had introduced Onassis to Jackie. Ew. It was another painful reminder that she always came second. In private, Lee told Truman Capote in 1962 that she was obsessively jealous of her sister's success and status. Even though she told People magazine in 1976 that they were exceptionally close, people who knew them said there was always tension, whether it was about men, money, or fame. Lee was born on March 3, 1933. Jackie was born July 28, 1929. Lee was always following behind. When President John F. Kennedy was shot in Dallas on November 22 in 1963, Lee flew from London to Washington the next day. She stayed with Jackie for weeks. During the funeral on November 25, Lee cried hard as the plane flew over Arlington Cemetery. That night, she left a note on Jackie's pillow saying, "Good night, my darling Jax, the bravest and noblest of all." She stayed until December 6th and spent Christmas with Jackie in Palm Beach. But 5 years later, Jackie married Onassis on October 20th, 1968. Lee felt deeply hurt. She had dated him first in 1962. She went to the wedding, but something inside her broke. In public, she still denied any rivalry, but the pain from Jackie's choices stayed with her for decades. That night in 1963, when she had cried for Jackie, turned into something else by 1968, something colder. Things got even harder between Lee and her own daughter, Tina. Tina was born on August 18, 1960. By the mid-1970s, Lee was criticizing her teenage daughter's weight, especially around 1975 and 1976. It hurt Tina deeply. When she was 17 in 1977, Tina moved out and went to live with Jackie in New York. Lee had just gone through a divorce in 1974 from Prince Stanislaus Radziwill. Her life was falling apart. By 1975, she was already bankrupt. Tina's father wasn't helping much either. Jackie stepped in and set up trust funds for both Tina and her brother Anthony in 1976. But the move to Jackie's home made the distance between mother and daughter permanent. Even after all this, when Lee died in 2019, she left everything to Tina. Her will was signed on September 20th, 2018. It gave Tina $50 million. But Tina later said in a 2024 video that the money didn't make up for the emotional coldness she had grown up with. In 1994, Jackie Kennedy died. Her will shocked everyone. She left Lee nothing, not a single dollar. The will said, "I've made no provision in this my will for my sister, Lee Radziwill, for whom I have great affection because I have already done so during my lifetime." But insiders believed it was revenge. Rumors had swirled since 1962 that Lee had been involved with JFK even before his death. That same year, Lee had also introduced Jackie to Onassis, and Jackie never forgot. The will gave $500,000 to Lee's children, Anthony and Tina, but nothing to Lee herself. Jackie's total estate was worth over $43 million and went entirely to her children, Caroline and John Jr., born in 1957 and 1960. By then, Lee and Jackie hardly spoke. What Lee had once denied so strongly, the rivalry, was confirmed with silence. In the early 1980s, they tried to repair things. Around 1982 and 1983, they met for lunches and exchanged letters, but it didn't last. A 1983 letter from Jackie to Lee brought everything crashing down. Jackie accused Lee of having an affair with Robert F. Kennedy, her brother-in-law. The affair supposedly began during a vacation in Antigua in January 1964. FBI files even backed the rumors, saying the affair lasted until 1968. Lee had denied this in a 1976 interview, but the damage was done. Ethel Kennedy was heartbroken when she found out in 1984. By 1994, Jackie cut Lee out of her will. The past couldn't be erased. Gore Vidal later said Lee once bragged about sleeping with JFK in France in 1959. That made the betrayal even worse. By the early 2000s, Lee quietly stepped away from the spotlight. In 2001, she sold her Hamptons home for $3.05 million and moved to a quiet apartment on Avenue Montaigne in Paris. Her glamorous days with Warhol and Capote were long gone. In 2015, when she was 82, Lee was rushed to the hospital in New York. The family didn't say what caused it, but people close to her whispered that she had been drinking heavily for years, sometimes finishing 2 bottles of wine a day. She had already survived cancer in the 1990s and had a hysterectomy in 1990. After the 2015 hospitalization, she returned to Paris and became even more reclusive. By 2016, she had cut herself off from almost everyone. On February 15, 2019, Lee Radziwill died in her Manhattan apartment. She was 85. Her daughter, Tina, was the only one at her bedside. Her son, Anthony, had died in 1999 at age 40 from cancer. No one else from the Kennedy family came to say goodbye. Her funeral on February 25 had only 50 guests. Medical bills of $200,000 were unpaid when she passed. There were rumors that she hadn't spoken to old friends like Rudolf Nureyev's circle in years. Her death certificate, filed on February 20th, 2019, said no autopsy was done. It only listed natural causes. Tina had to handle everything alone. 5 months before her death on September 20th, 2018, Lee signed her final will. It revealed a $50 million estate, all of it left to Tina. The will was made public on March 22, 2019. Neither Caroline Kennedy nor Lee's daughter-in-law, Lee Radziwill, got anything. Carol, whose husband Anthony had died in 1999, filed a lawsuit in April 2019. She said Lee had promised her $10 million from the family trust. Caroline Kennedy, worth $250 million, joined the legal battle in June 2019, saying Lee had once promised her $5 million back in 1995. Lee's fortune included $20 million in Paris real estate, $15 million in jewelry, and $15 million in old investments. People had thought she was broke.
In 2017, she sold a diamond ring for $950 to pay all just to pay that. It turned out she had been hiding money for years. The lawsuits ended in 2021. Tina kept 80% and paid out $8 million to settle everything.
That betrayal reminded people of Lee's old jealousy when Jackie inherited $26 million from Onassis in the 1970s. In October 2019, Christie's auctioned over 500 of Lee's belongings. The sale brought in $1.02 million, but what shocked everyone were the letters. One from 1962 showed Jackie accusing Lee of selling White House secrets for $5,000. Another from 1973 revealed Jackie's anger over Lee's relationship with Onassis, saying it cost her $10 million in legal settlements. A letter from 1959 had Lee begging Jackie for $100,000 to help with her divorce. The auction drew over 2,000 viewers online. Some of the biggest bids were for Peter Beard photos and Spanish art pieces. One letter confirmed they had fought in 1974 over the rights to the Grey Gardens documentary. Even Jackie's old photos from India in 1961 sold for $20,000. The rivalry never stopped. After Lee's death, her daughter Tina finally spoke out. In a 2024 interview, Tina said she always felt invisible. Lee favored Anthony, especially after his cancer diagnosis in 1990. Tina said that grief consumed her mother and left her feeling left out. The confession came out on May 30th, 2025 in a YouTube video. Tina said Lee never gave her emotional support even though she left her the full estate. She also said the favoritism affected her marriage and her identity. She divorced in 2005. Tina said she stayed quiet for years out of respect, but the truth had to come out.